Someone was listening. I stayed frozen long after Roscoe's howl died in his throat. The footsteps didn't move. Whoever stood outside my tent was close enough that I could hear their breathing. Or maybe it was mine, loud and uneven in my ears. The fabric of the tent felt impossibly thin, like paper stretched between me and something that didn't belong there. Roscoe shifted beside me, muscles tense, ready to explode into noise again. I pressed my hand into his fur, silently begging him to stay quiet. Minutes passed. Then snow crunched softly. A single step. Then another. Slow. Careful. The sound circled the tent, stopping every few seconds, as if the person outside were mapping the space, learning where I lay, where the zipper was, where my head rested. My grip tightened around the gun. I didn't raise it. I didn't breathe. I told myself not to speak, but fear has a way of forcing decisions on you. "I know you're there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave." Silence answered me. Then, fabric brushed lightly against the side of the tent. Not a grab, not a yank, a deliberate touch. Roscoe growled deep in his chest, the sound vibrating through him and into me. Whoever was outside froze again. I swallowed hard. "I don't want any trouble," I said. "Just go." Seconds stretched until they felt like hours. Then I heard footsteps retreating, slowly at first, then picking up a pace, crunching farther and farther away until the sound melted back into the forest. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't even shift my legs. I stayed locked in place, gun clutched against my chest, staring at the thin wall of nylon that separated me from the dark. Roscoe stayed alert the entire night. Every time I started to drift, he would lift his head, ears twitching, forcing me back into awareness. I slept in fragments, minutes at a time, never fully unconscious, never fully awake. At some point, exhaustion won. When I woke again, faint gray light filtered through the tent walls. Dawn. Relief hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. I packed as fast as my numb fingers would allow. I didn't eat. I didn't bother reorganizing gear. I shoved everything into my pack, clipped Roscoe's leash on, and left without looking back. The hike to the truck felt longer than it had the day before. Every snapped twig made my heart jump. Every shadow between trees felt like it could peel itself free and follow me. When I finally reached the pull-off, I exhaled for the first time in hours. But something stopped me cold. Footprints. They weren't mine. Fresh, deep impressions in the snow, leading from the tree line straight toward where my tent had been, and then back again. My stomach dropped. They weren't random. They weren't wandering. They were purposeful. I loaded the truck with shaking hands, got in, and locked the doors, even though I knew how ridiculous that was out there. As I drove away, I checked my mirrors again and again, half expecting to see someone standing between the trees, watching me leave. I never went back to that forest. I never camped alone again. People talk about the dangers of animals, of weather, of getting lost. They don't talk enough about the people who go out into places like that because they know no one will hear you scream. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't the darkness. It's the fact that someone else is comfortable inside it. I didn't think much of the drive at first. Holiday weekends always blur together in memory. Gas stations, fast food, long stretches of highway where your thoughts wander faster than the car. I left Melbourne, Florida early on the morning of July 4th, heading north toward Charleston, South Carolina, to visit my friend Mark. We hadn't seen each other in years, and the trip felt like a reset more than a vacation. Mark was doing a law internship and renting a house near the city. I planned to crash on the downstairs couch by the windows for the weekend. Nothing fancy, just old friends, warm weather, and a break from routine. The first night passed easily. We played pickleball before sunset, laughed until our arms ached, and grabbed food downtown. Charleston glowed at night, historic buildings lit warm and gold, crowds filling the streets with energy and noise. The next morning, we walked through the main market. It was packed. Vendors calling out, music drifting through the air, tourists shoulder to shoulder. Eventually, we wandered toward the docks, where the air smelled like salt and hot pavement. That's when I saw him. He stood out immediately, even in the chaos. A man in a wedding suit. Not just formal clothes, an actual wedding suit. Crisp jacket, clean dress shoes, a neatly tied bow tie. Everything about him looked freshly pressed, untouched by sweat or heat, which made no sense in the thick southern humidity. He moved slowly down the road near the water, drifting instead of walking, like gravity worked differently for him. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look homeless. His long black curls framed his face perfectly, and his skin was warm and tan, unblemished. The strangest part? He was alone. Everyone else moved with purpose. Tourists snapping photos, couples holding hands, families weaving through traffic. But he walked through it all, as if the world around him didn't exist. If we had crossed the street, we would have walked straight into him. I felt a sharp, instinctive pull in my chest. "Mark," I muttered, grabbing his arm. "We're not crossing." He looked at me, confused. "Why?" "Just trust me." We turned right instead, heading deeper into the city. I didn't look back, but I felt watched in the way you do when someone's eyes linger longer than they should. We walked faster than necessary. "He didn't look homeless," I said after a block. "Did you notice that?" Mark nodded slowly. "Yeah. His clothes were too clean." Neither of us laughed it off. A few streets later, we stopped near a shop window, and that's when Mark froze. "Tell me you see that," he said. I turned. The man in the suit stood far down the street, diagonal from us, moving with that same slow, detached shuffle. Same clothes, same hair, same unnatural pace. It made no sense. There was no direct route he could have taken without passing us. No alley we missed. No crowd thick enough to hide him. Yet there he was. We stared until he drifted out of view. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. We spent the rest of the day exploring, trying to forget it. By the time fireworks lit up the sky that night on a nearby island, the unease had dulled enough to feel distant. We told ourselves he was just a strange guy wandering the city. But something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous, not threatening, just out of place. The next night, July 5th, we went on a ghost tour, something we'd booked before the trip. Charleston was packed, alive with weekend energy, laughter spilling from restaurants, lights glowing against centuries-old brick. After the tour ended, we walked through the busiest stretch of downtown. A wave of people moved toward us, fast and tight. And then, there he was, right in the middle of the crowd. The same man, the same suit. He moved slowly while everyone else surged around him, like water flowing past a rock. Two people brushed right beside him, shoulder to shoulder, without reacting, like he wasn't there at all. He didn't blend in. He disrupted everything. For a brief second, his eyes met mine. Then he looked away and continued forward, unchanged, untouched by the world around him. Mark and I stopped walking. We didn't need to say anything. We both knew. He wasn't supposed to be there. Mark didn't say a word. Neither did I. We stood there in the middle of the sidewalk as the crowd flowed around us, people bumping our shoulders, laughing, talking, completely unaware that something was deeply wrong. The man in the wedding suit continued down the street at that same unnatural pace, never speeding up, never slowing down. He didn't turn his head again. He didn't need to. We watched him until the crowd thinned and the noise softened. When it did, he was still there, still shuffling, still separate, until he slipped into a narrow side street and vanished around a corner. "That's impossible," Mark finally said. I nodded. My mouth felt dry. "He keeps appearing." Mark was the most grounded person I knew. Logical, skeptical. The type to dismantle a ghost story in seconds. But there was no explanation that fit what we'd just seen. We walked back toward the house in silence. Charleston felt different now. The lights seemed harsher, the shadows deeper. Every reflection in a shop window made me flinch, half expecting to see that same suit behind us. When we reached Mark's place, he went upstairs to his room. I stayed downstairs on the couch by the windows, facing the alleyways and the abandoned house across the street. I closed the blinds, but not completely. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed to see the outside to prove nothing was there. Sleep didn't come easily. Sometime in the middle of the night, a soft tapping sound pulled me awake. Tap, tap. I froze. It came again, gentle but deliberate. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure Mark could hear it upstairs. Slowly, carefully, I shifted and lifted the blinds just enough to see outside. The alley was empty. At first. Then I noticed movement at the far end, a man turning the corner, walking away. The suit caught the dim streetlight. My breath caught. Just before he disappeared, he stopped and looked back. Not directly at me, not fully, just enough to let me know he knew I was watching. The next morning, I told Mark everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "That's disturbing," he finally said. He didn't laugh. He didn't explain it away. Months later, he still won't. I left Charleston on July 6th. The drive back to Florida felt longer than the drive up. Every rest stop window reflection made my skin prickle. Every man in a suit made my pulse spike. I'm not someone who believed in things like this before. Now, I double-check locks. I memorize footsteps. I avoid sleeping near windows. Some things aren't meant to follow you, and some things don't need to. They just wait until you notice them. I used to think I was a creature of habit, the kind of person who thrived on routine, predictability, and quiet. I lived alone in a small house I bought a few years ago. Nothing special, just enough space for one person and a life that didn't demand much interaction. I worked from home, ordered groceries online, went to the gym late at night, and barely spoke to my neighbors. That routine is the only reason it took me so long to realize something was wrong. It started on a Tuesday night around 2:30 a.m. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV playing softly in the background. I was half dreaming when a dull sound pulled me back. Thump. It came from somewhere near the back of the house, not loud, not sharp, just enough to register. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. I told myself it was the house settling. Older homes make noises. Everyone knows that. I checked the back door, made sure it was locked, then went to bed without thinking much of it. The next morning, I noticed something small, but strange. When I opened the back door to let in some air, the handle felt loose. The deadbolt still worked fine, but the handle itself wobbled, like it had been twisted too hard. I remember thinking, I should fix that later. That night, I went to the gym around 11 p.m. like I always did. I liked going late. Fewer people, less noise. When I pulled into my driveway around midnight, I noticed my porch light was off. I always leave it on. I sat in my car for a few seconds trying to remember if I'd turned it off earlier. I couldn't. Eventually, I shrugged it off. Memory plays tricks on you when life gets repetitive. Inside, Everything looked normal. Still, I walked through every room before going to bed. I didn't know why. I had never done that before. On Thursday morning, my phone alarm went off, and I immediately noticed my battery was at 12%. That made no sense. I always charge my phone overnight. I reached for the cable. It was plugged into my phone, but the charger wasn't connected to the wall. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe I'd knocked it loose in my sleep. That explanation didn't sit right, though. My phone was still neatly on the nightstand, not tangled in blankets. That was the moment I started paying attention. That night, I stayed up later than usual, sitting in the dark with the TV off listening. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Slow thumps. From the back of the house. Footsteps. My breath caught, but after a minute, the sound stopped. I told myself it came from outside. Suburbs aren't silent, even at night. People walk dogs. Cars pass. Animals move. The next day, I found muddy shoe prints near the back door. They weren't clear impressions. No visible tread. It looked like someone had tried to wipe their shoes before stepping farther inside. My stomach dropped. I hadn't had anyone over. I hadn't gone outside in muddy shoes. I crouched there, staring at the floor, my heart racing, trying to come up with any explanation that didn't involve what my instincts were screaming at me. That's when I noticed faint scratch marks around the lock. Thin, careful, like someone had worked at it slowly. I called a locksmith that afternoon and told him the lock was failing. I didn't mention the footprints. I didn't want to sound paranoid, even to myself. He replaced the lock and told me everything was secure. That night, I pushed a chair under the back door handle and locked my bedroom door for the first time since moving in. I woke up just before 4 a.m. to the sound of tapping. Not knocking, tapping. Light, deliberate taps against my bedroom door, like someone testing it with their fingertips. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The tapping stopped after about a minute. Then I heard soft footsteps moving away. I stayed awake until morning. Every time my eyes started to close, I imagined the tapping again. Soft fingers brushing against wood, testing patience, testing fear. When the sun finally rose, I unlocked my bedroom door with shaking hands and walked through the house. The chair was still wedged under the back door handle. The back door itself was unlocked. The new lock wasn't broken. It wasn't damaged. It had simply been turned from the inside. That was the moment denial became impossible. Someone had been inside my house while I slept, and they knew exactly how to move through it. I called the police, trying to explain without sounding hysterical. They checked the house, the yard, every door and window. No signs of forced entry. One officer gently suggested I might have unlocked the door myself and forgotten. I nodded, even though I knew it wasn't true. That night, I refused to sleep. I left every light on and sat at the kitchen table with a knife in front of me, staring at the hallway. Around 2 a.m., a sound drifted up from the basement. The basement door, just outside the kitchen, was cracked open. I hadn't opened it. Dread washed over me in a slow, sick wave. I stood, legs trembling, and stepped closer. I didn't open the door fully. I leaned forward, peering through the narrow gap. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw a shape, a person, standing still. I don't know if they were looking up at me, but I felt seen. I slammed the door shut and ran. I was already in my car when I called 911 again. This time, I didn't try to sound calm. The police arrived quickly. I waited in one of their cars as they entered my house. Minutes passed that felt endless. Then they brought him out, barefoot, dark clothes, hair matted like he hadn't slept in a real bed in weeks. He didn't look at me. They put him in the back of the cruiser, and I refused to turn my head. My body shook so hard I could barely speak when the officers asked questions. One of them asked how long I'd lived there. A few years, I said. He nodded slowly. They told me they found food wrappers and bottled water hidden behind the furnace in the basement. Someone had been sleeping down there, using insulation as bedding. They even found a phone charger plugged into an outlet. He had been living in my house, watching my routines, waiting for me to leave. Days later, I was scrolling through my phone when I found the photo. It was me, sleeping, taken at 3:11 a.m. The same night my phone had been unplugged. I handed it over as evidence. They told me it would add more charges. That doesn't undo what happened. I still live with it. I don't go into basements alone anymore, and I'll never assume I'm alone just because I don't see anyone. Some horrors don't announce themselves. They move in quietly and wait.